On today's episode of Gathering the Kings,
we reached out to Hollywood and teamed up with Jim Henson's Creature Shop, the people behind Muppets and Sesame Street, to do all of our artistic design. With their help, we're building what we believe to be the world's most realistic robotic animals, scientifically designed to stimulate emotional attachment, raising money. It brutally hard, even sort of growing up through Stanford and living in the Bay Area for a period of time. I failed, and we ran out of money twice. Rule number one for every CEO: don't run out of cash. Ran out of cash twice.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, Gathering the Kings podcast, coming to you here today with another king on the stage. But this king has a guest of his own, Mr. Tom Stevens on the king stage. My brother, how we doing?
Things are well. Thank you so much, Chaz. Thank you for having us.
You know, you say us. For those that maybe aren't sitting here watching the video, she just introduced herself, it sounds like. But who do we have with us in addition to you?
Well, this is Jenny. Jenny is a fully interactive robotic emotional support animal, and she'll be the first to be both an FDA medical device and a remote safety and health monitoring platform. So lots of things to unpack there, but basically she's a dog for people who can't have dogs.
Yeah, this is incredible. Just for the listener's sake, you and I have been chatting for the last little bit here before we hit the record button, and she could hear me at the beginning, and then we moved your audio to where she couldn't hear me any longer, and she was looking at the screen like, where did he go? And it was just one of the funniest / weirdest things that I've experienced today. Is that this robot dog wondered where I went, which is really, really cool. And look, she's doing it right now. Just looking at them like, wait, what is that? You know,
where are they?
Exactly. Well, like you said, Tom, we have a ton to unpack here. You are obviously a brilliant mind living somewhere in the future, and you've brought the future back to us. And so we got to dive into this. Before we dive into the mechanics, literally the mechanics of Jenny and how you do this, but let's talk about you for a second. Why do you do this? Why are you moved every single day to not necessarily just do this business, but to impact people? It sounds like what's inside for you?
Thank you for asking. So my background is I've been in the high-tech industry for 35 years. My two Tombot co-founders and I built a prior startup into one of the world's largest litigation automation companies.
Wow.
We were successfully acquired in 2011, which gave me the freedom to think about other things. Unfortunately, that same year, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. And that began a series of very difficult choices that I had to make for her. Had to move in a caregiver, had to take away her car keys. But by far the worst of those decisions was the day I recognized that she could no longer safely care for her dog. I successfully rehomed the dog with good family friends, but my mother was devastated. And quite frankly, I went from being the golden boy to being the villain in her life. Every day was, where's my dog? Why can't I have my dog? When am I getting my dog back? I looked around for substitutes for live animal companions, but she hated everything that I brought home. And so just through an effort to salvage my relationship with my mother, I started looking around. I began a multi-year research and education journey that culminated in a master's degree from Stanford University. Wow. And along the way, I learned that my mom's story is shared by tens of millions of other seniors around the world with dementia, and about 1 billion people in total that suffer from some serious mental or physical health adversity, which makes it impossible for them to safely or practically care for a live animal. And so we launched Tombot to serve these people.
Yeah, that's incredible. I want to dig into you a little bit in that. We'll dig into the story of you serving your mom, really, but all these other millions of people. But most people would have come across this scenario and said, "You know what, Mom? I'm sorry. This is the situation now. You can't have your dog, and this is why." And maybe they would have gone online and tried to find some other options, but there were none. And then they just deal with the circumstances and they go on. But what you said was that turned into a multiple year research project and a master's degree, then eventually turning into product research and development unto launching a company. That's not normal. Why did that turn into that for you? What's different about you?
Well, one of the things that's not discussed very much publicly is how serious mental health adversities affect the family members around the person with that mental health adversity. Dementia, Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. It is progressive in nature, which means it starts in a very mild state, called mild cognitive impairment, and
Yeah.
then it progresses over time. And if you are unfamiliar with that, as I was, these changes kind of sneak up on you. You go, oh, mom's kind of struggling. Oh, she made a weird decision, or she's getting a little forgetful. And then, oh, she's not paying her bills. Her car has more damage on it than the last time. So these things kind of sneak up on you.
Yeah.
So from a family member, my perspective and that which has been shared with me by countless family members that I've spoken to since is there's a desire to first of all understand what's happening with the loved one, but also a desire to do something. And there's tremendous guilt associated with becoming the parent of your parent.
Yeah.
Most people, myself included, are fortunate to have parents that had successful lives. They lived independently, they took care of themselves. And so we as children could live very selfishly, just kind of focusing on ourselves. And then as our parents' issues mounted and we became more and more involved with their care, we have to make very tough decisions for them, and it makes us
Yeah.
feel badly. So most people are actually really interested in figuring these things out, but are either not equipped with a
Right.
solution, don't have the time to work on it, don't have the financial freedom to do it, and so are just basically left to do with what they can.
Yeah. I think that, well, first off, you're right. I mean, you know that based on research. I know that from personal experience and just a couple of family members of my own. But I think most people listening can go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay. So I hear that answer and that's great. And I love that. That's perfect. Now we're going to move that to the side. And it's just you, me, and a bunch of entrepreneurs. Because at the boil of it, yeah, you were being like all the other people you just described, and you want to take action and help your family member because you're right. But what's in you that made it, that turned it into this thing? Because that's the entrepreneurial piece. That's like the guy listening right now who just started his own, HVAC company, or the gal that just started a hair salon, or whatever the scenario is that they're listening and they're like, he's like me. What was it that took you to the brink of not just doing something for their family member, but doing something for all of the other people so they could do something for their family member?
Well, I'm sure with all of the interviews you've done over the years, Chaz, you've heard a lot of commonality in this answer. But I think there's always something emotional, or usually something emotional that
Yeah.
serves as a catalyst for taking the first step down this journey. My mother was a special education teacher. She had multiple master's degrees, the kind of person that would do anything for anybody. Also the kind of person that would not hesitate to ask anybody to do anything for her. It was kind of the world that I grew up with. I look back on it and realize how strange that was, but also wonderful. And
Yeah.
it through her really gave me a desire to serve. Now, my career up to that point in high tech was almost exclusively financially motivated, saving money on lawyers' bills in effect. And while it was intellectually challenging, stimulating, interesting, devoid of any kind of passion. And so this emotional event of wanting to salvage my relationship with my mother, really formed that catalyst. But I'm also a business person, and I recognized after being highly unsuccessful in working with my mother that there was a gap in the marketplace. And so I started wondering why. Why is there a gap in the marketplace? What's really going on here that's preventing technology to come to the market? And is today a day, or in the last few years, the time where technology is really ready to come on to the market? And there's a reason why there are zero realistic robotic animals. It's technically very, very challenging to do.
Yeah.
And prior to a decade ago would have been impossible. But big changes, particularly in smartphones, in sensors, in the maker space with 3D printing, there have become a wealth of technologies, sometimes very small scale, very simple, but make R&D in this space really practical without spending hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, the underneath to that, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, is that there's nothing that's ever been created or uncreated from an angle of like, just we have all, like, everything inside of Jenny right now has always been here. It's just a matter of other people, like you're saying, that put together the technology in a cell phone or in a 3D printer, that then you were able to combine some of those things to then make another new discovery, for lack of better terms. And I think that the encouragement or the courage for the listener right now is whatever they need in order to be successful is here. They
I,
have to find it. Would you
I
agree
think
with that?
absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point. So I've often said that I don't believe in technical revolution. I believe in technical or technology evolution. Your example of the smartphone and cellular communications, the internet, all of these things which, smartphones, touchscreens, all of these things that we take for granted today and didn't have, if you're a little bit older, didn't have early in our lives, just sort of appeared magically, suddenly and magically. But if you dig into them, they really didn't. Cellular technology has been around, for a really long time, really, really decades
Yeah.
before it initially emerged in a commercial sense. And the same thing with smartphones and portable
Yeah.
electronic devices, things like that. So there's the fundamentals exist. Maybe they need to evolve further before they're practical. Maybe there needs to be more. Maybe the technology hasn't reached critical mass before it's really practical
Yeah.
to do things. Because at some point in time, or some level, there's a finite amount of capital that can be deployed in bringing a new product to market. Obviously,
Right.
hardware products are much more challenging and capital intensive than software products, and more difficult to raise capital than for
Yeah.
software products. But there's a finite amount. You have to say, okay, if I can't get this to market in X amount of dollars, it's just not going to happen. And you have to be able to forecast that. If it
Yeah.
needs 2X or 3X, it's not timely, right? The,
Yeah.
the, the world has to evolve further
Yeah.
until that capital that needs to be deployed can
Yeah.
successfully bring a first of its kind product to market.
This is a really deep well, especially knowing just the advances that you've made personally. And we're going to get to Jenny here in a second, but technology, but then even before that, it was industry, right? And so, how do you know, as an inventor or an innovator, kind of depending upon what bucket we're really putting you in? What we just said was that you're an innovator. Is like, I'm taking all these pieces and I'm putting them together into a brand new thing, which kind of makes you an innovator. But I think back to Henry Ford, and I'm like, well, he didn't calculate 2 and 3 times, and then oh well, the 8 cylinder doesn't work anymore. It's no, I will have the 8 cylinders. So where's the line for you as an innovator, inventor, where it's like, okay, there's a projection, but like, this thing is coming to market. It just may not be in my lifetime. Who knows, right?
So great question. I'm going to give you a little bit of a roundabout answer to this,
Okay.
because for me this is hugely important. And innovation once again usually has some sort of emotional catalyst to it.
Yeah.
Not always, but usually does. Henry Ford hated horses. So there's a little factoid for your audience to look up. He hated horses. So coming out with a mass-produced vehicle was really driven by his fear and hatred of horses. Lots of problems with horses back in the day on
Yeah.
safety and pollution and things like that. So that served as his catalyst, and he just was extremely gifted in figuring out how to solve problems. But so picking up on that last point, I did not, and my team did not say, hey, wouldn't it be cool to come out with a robotic dog and then figure out how many people would like it? Rather, we became experts in Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And we're fortunate, once again, evolution as opposed to revolution, over 150 peer-reviewed studies done before we took our first step in the product that showed the benefits of emotional attachment objects.
Yeah.
Seniors with dementia suffer from something called behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. These include loneliness, depression, anxiety. In my mother's case, hallucinations and violent anger. The peer-reviewed studies show that where a senior can form a robust emotional attachment to an object,
Yeah.
traditionally that was a human baby doll or a stuffed animal, that senior gets a great deal of relief from the behavioral and psychological symptoms and a corresponding reduction in need from certain medications, including psychotropics. The problem is my mom hated stuffed animals and human baby dolls. And so she and most other seniors were kind of left out of the cold from getting those benefits. Research on robotic animals showed they significantly outperformed the traditional objects and have the added benefit of reducing pain and the need for pain medications. But the problem there is the existing technologies are either simple children's mechanical toys that have been rebranded for seniors or are prohibitively expensive robots. This whole industry was actually invented by a research institute in Japan. It came out with a robotic seal called Paro. Paro's been featured on Master of None and a number of other television features. They invented this space, but they weren't a real business. They were a research institute. The product costs over $6,000. Most senior care facilities can't afford it, let alone individuals who need one for themselves in order to form that emotional attachment. And I was not about to buy a $6,000 robot on the chance that my mom hated it as much as she did everything else that I brought home. So all of this was done before we started the business and before I graduated from Stanford. But armed with this information, it really gave me clues on how to approach it. First of all, studying the problem, becoming an expert in the problem, so you know not just intuitively, but can know empirically that you're actually solving the problem. No company should exist, no business should exist that isn't solving a real problem, solving a real problem. So you have to have a real problem to begin with, but
Hmm.
solving a real problem, and that problem has to be a hair on fire problem. It needs to be something that if it isn't solved today, people will suffer. People may die. Now, that's obviously kind of dramatic when you think of B2B, SaaS software, fintech software, but they have to have a very serious problem that if it isn't solved, they will suffer greatly. Otherwise, people aren't motivated to spend money to solve the problem.
Right.
So becoming an expert in Alzheimer's dementia really was critical so that we could understand it. First of all, what the problems are and whether or not we were solving them. And what we realized the gap actually was a gap in emotional attachment objects. So the very first thing that we did is set up customer studies. We studied with over 700 seniors with dementia and trying to understand what they would want in an emotional attachment object. And of the many things we learned, the three primary hypotheses that we confirmed are seniors with dementia prefer things that move over things
Hmm.
that don't move. So help explain why stuffed animals and human baby dolls were not
Not working.
attractive to most seniors.
Yeah.
Secondly, they prefer objects with which they're familiar. So dogs and cats over wild animals or fictitious creatures. So we knew that we had to stay home with what people knew. And then thirdly, the more realistic, the better. Realism in terms of appearance, realism in texture, and most importantly, realism in behaviors. And we reached out to Hollywood and teamed up with Jim Henson's Creature Shop, the people behind Muppets and Sesame Street, to do all of our artistic design. And with their help, we're building what we believe to be the world's most realistic robotic animals, scientifically designed to stimulate emotional attachment. And then once in place, we become an ideal and unique platform, an obtrusive platform for monitoring that senior for safety and health. And I realize I've got a little bit off on my pitch here, but just to get back to the question, minimum viable product, right?
Yeah.
If you don't, if you're not an expert in your problem, you don't know, first of all, if you have product market fit, meaning that you're solving the problem in a way that your customer loves. And for us,
Yeah.
the bar is literally love. People have to fall in love with the product in order to get that emotional attachment. And
Yeah.
then secondly, the minimum viable product. We could come out with a much more expensive product. We could be in the cost range of par of the robotic seal.
Right.
but people won't buy it, right? Because a less technologically advanced product, or a less expensive product, even if it is technically more sophisticated, will meet the needs of those people. And so starting with a problem, understanding the problem, knowing how to solve the problem, and then solving it in the least technologically, most cost-effective manner possible. And this is really what wasn't possible a decade ago. Before widespread advent of smartphones and small sensors, inexpensive sensors, I mean, touch sensors that are essentially free today. Um, and once again, being able to rapidly prototype because of 3D printing and all of the supporting technologies around prototyping, it would have taken tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to get to where we'll get to for less than $10 million.
Yeah, I love the explanation there. It wasn't too much at all. I think that anybody who's interested in really winning in business has to understand this. And so the market fit is like, okay, yeah, I want to build a deck for somebody. They need a deck. I build decks, but it's like, no, wait. There's so much more that can make that deck a larger purchase or a better purchase, or the whole thing is just really cruxed on knowing who you're serving and what the problem is. And so I appreciate that deep understanding. What do you think from a, like, okay, research, innovation, and you did a ton of work, but then it was like launch. And so tell us a little bit about that, and maybe if there was a good decision that you made in the launch, because I think a lot of people are like, okay, I got my avatar, I know what the problem is. You just did a great job of that. Then what? How did you sell the thing?
Well, so we got lucky. The output of our customer studies could have been a set of plastic keys for someone to fidget with. It could have been a quilted blanket. It could have been, something really elaborate, like a multi tens of thousands of dollar robot. But we got really lucky that it was the output of the data actually led us to puppies, and we could build these puppies in a design and build these puppies with a relatively modest amount of capital infusion, and then offer them for a price that most people could afford, even without insurance reimbursement. So we got lucky. I'm a data person, always looking to data to confirm or reject hypotheses. One of my favorite quotes is from the former CEO of Netscape, whose name just slipped out of my head. But he said, if we have data, we'll go with data. If we have opinions, we'll go with mine. And in my company, no one wants to trust my opinion. So really work very, very hard to get data to either confirm or reject our hypotheses. But the next hypothesis up, once we had this as a high fidelity prototype, see if anybody would buy it. Do people how hard will it be to sell? So we did a Kickstarter campaign. We ran it for a very short period of time, had a finite number of units that we had made available, and did virtually no marketing to get it out there. Just kind of hung up that Kickstarter campaign with a few dollars spent on Facebook ads. We sold out of our least expensive units in the first 7 hours of the campaign. And so we realized then that it wasn't going to take a deep scientific or technical explanation to sell the product that people intuitively understand. It's a dog, it's a puppy, and my mom can't have a puppy, and so therefore this is a puppy for my mom who can't have a puppy. So we're very, very fortunate. The other fortuitous side of this is because it is a social impact play. It's really dealing with health and well-being, which is one of the UN social impact charters. The media loves it. The media loves the story, and of course they love the backstory, but of course they also like puppies. And so the media has robustly covered us. We've been covered over 400 times by TV, online, print publications, not just here in the US, but around the world. So we got lucky.
That by design, do you think, or was that just happenstance because of the emotional connection to it?
No, so first of all, a lot of things encouraged us to continue. This is entrepreneurship,
Data, right?
particularly developing a piece of hardware, is really, really, really hard. Why keep going? Even if the data is looking favorable, why keep going? I just go out and get a job and get a good paycheck and let somebody else bear the risk. Why keep going with this? The professional senior care community is a wonderful body of people. Nobody in this space is doing it for the money. They're doing it because they care about senior health, senior well-being, because there just isn't a lot of money there. There aren't a lot of people make money taking care of seniors. 83% of seniors with dementia live at home and are cared for by an unpaid family member. Why is this family member doing this? Because they love their parent, they love their spouse, they love their sibling or their aunt or uncle. And so they do that. We, through my mother, and then once we got into this community through sort of fairly viral referrals, we were able to connect with thousands and thousands of senior professional care providers who not only gave us a lot of input technically, what the product needed to do, gave us access to users and patients to participate with our studies, but were just incredibly warm and nurturing and caring and encouraging to our journey. And just the thought of disappointing them, of failing to come out with a product and disappointing them was more than enough to keep the fire burning and want to get it all the way to launch.
Hey, kings and queens, Chaz Wolfe. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other. Let's help each other grow.
Yeah, there's a principle there. For you, it was teasing the client, but the client was in essence your mom. It was the people, that you look at in the senior community, and how would you want to disappoint them? But the same principle, just for the listener's sake, exists whether you have someone in business that you're collaborating with and you throw out a target and say, hey, hold me accountable to this, whether it's your spouse, whether it's other business owners that you're trying to do collaborations with or strategic partnerships. Like, there's always ways to be able to not want to disappoint, aka move the needle, don't quit. There's people counting on you. But if you're alone, talk about the isolation factor. For you, it's the senior who's alone and you're solving that problem. Well, this podcast and Gathering the Kings as a mastermind group solves isolation for entrepreneurs. And so for the listener right now who's isolated in business, they can't have this impact that you just said. You just said, I had people counting on me and pulling me forward, right?
I had kind of a Lone Ranger personality earlier in my career.
We all do.
I'm good enough to figure this out on my own,
That's right.
and I don't need your help, and blah blah blah. That just turned out to be immaturity. My first real exposure to this was dealing with my mom. I thought I was alone in this world. I thought I had a unique problem set with my mother, my crazy Nancy. Her name was Nancy. Crazy Nancy's off the hook finally. She's gone from being eccentric to completely crazy, and now this burden's on me, and I don't understand any of this, and I'm really frustrated, and she's really frustrated, but it turns out that she is not unique. Everyone's unique in their own specific ways, but in general, she wasn't at all. And my first real exposure to this was getting pulled into Alzheimer's support groups. These are people that have been dealing with the same issues I had been dealing with for years. And I can say, oh, is this happening? Yes. Is that happening? Yes. Is this happening? Oh, not, no. Well, it's going to. And here's what you need to do to prepare for that. And so the emotional support from this peer group turned out to be invaluable. And it made me sort of step out of this woe is me dynamic I was taking on, which is deal with it much more clinically, much more practically, and get less caught up with all the challenges that my mother was throwing at me. And it's true for business as well. This is going to be for entrepreneurs who haven't started this journey yet, or aspiring entrepreneurs. This will likely be the most difficult thing you ever take on professionally in your in your career, maybe in your whole life, because there are a lot of people that don't want to support you. There are a bunch of people who do, but but a lot of people who don't. And so you've got to find the way to connect to your peers
Yeah.
through organizations such as Gathering the Kings, through other types of founder groups, through your founding partners, through strategic relationships, through supply chain or customer relationships,
That's right.
and hold on to those, because those will be your rock, your anchor during the really tough times. I'm fortunate that I've worked with my founding partners for a very long time, 30 years and 25 years with my two different partners. And so we know each other. We know each other's warts. We know how to resolve disputes,
That's right.
but it's still probably not enough. You gotta look out for people that are going through exactly what you're going through in your particular silo of responsibility as a CEO, as a chief product officer, as the
Right.
CTO, as the COO, what have you, and try to, through community, uh, get the understanding that you can only get through experience, but also the emotional support.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. I appreciate that. Let's transition here. You've talked a lot about some of the things that worked for the building of Jenny. Give us a scenario where you did want to quit. It was a scenario where maybe you had made a bad choice, things were stacked up against you, maybe someone who was believing in you changed, they turned their back on you. Give us the dirty.
Well, I'll tell you the absolute worst, most difficult, most discouraging part of being an entrepreneur is funding the business. I was fortunate that I had some funds so I could get the company moving, but I didn't have the financial resources to fund the company all the way to first product shipment. It'll be close to $10 million. I didn't have anywhere near those financial capabilities. So we had to go out and make believers out of investors. Well,
Right.
first of all, 90+% of institutional investors will not invest in hardware under any circumstances. So for those of you that are considering a hardware journey, think twice about that, because you're really shrinking the universe of investors who could potentially support your business. If you're a software AI, generative AI kind of company, pretty easy to raise money today comparatively, just like it has been for fintech SaaS companies in the past and so forth. If you have the idea to be the next Airbnb or Uber, two-sided marketplace, you're going to be able to raise money. But as a hardware product, it's going to be much, much harder.
Okay.
And so secondly, it's a shrinking universe. Then when you look at the reason why people are reluctant to invest in hardware, it's really about risk of failure early on in the business for any hardware product, and even more true for a robot, is if you're going to come up with an idea that has market viability, it has to be something that's highly differentiated. It's going to be a big idea, more than likely.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that's actually really difficult to execute. Does the founding team have the ability to execute on that idea? That's a
Yep.
huge risk. There are a lot of robots that have been worked on over the years that never made it to market because the founders either couldn't overcome that risk, those
Right.
challenges to bring it to market, or they could overcome some of them and they brought it to market, but it didn't meet the promise. And then the second risk is, say you overcome all of those technical hurdles, will anybody buy it once you bring it to market? So your question is, what didn't go well? Raising money. It brutally hard, even sort of growing up through Stanford and living in the Bay Area for a period of time, being there right at the heart of the priests of Sand Hill Road, as they're referred to. It's kind of VC Central in Palo Alto. We failed. I failed. And we ran out of money twice. And, rule number one for every CEO, don't run out of cash. Ran out of cash twice.
If you don't mind, Tom, tell us about the one of those moments, or maybe both, but like the sticky of you first off admitting that you ran out of money is incredible value for the listener, because looking at where you are today, you just don't know that type of thing unless you just say it. So thank you for that. Tell us about that moment where you're like the oh snap moment,
Well, you question your own judgment a lot. Your family, who
Yeah.
depends upon you financially, questions your judgment a lot. Your partners question your ability a lot because they've done their job. you haven't done yours. And so there's a lot of sort of introspective self-analysis, self-criticism that comes along with that. And you say, okay, why am I doing this? Why should we continue? What's the future look like? For Tombot specifically, and this is not every analysis should be uniquely done and have its own unique outcome. Customers love us, so we had materially de-risked the business from a sales standpoint. Thanks to the media, we have the gift of the media loving to cover us. So we get new orders 7 days a week, 24, 30 days every month, without fail, passively. Just by having a website that's up, we get orders. So I knew that there was a business here. I knew that is simply a gap in from where we are to getting to where we could achieve a milestone where we start capturing that revenue and delivering a product to customers. So I had that. I had the love from the senior care community and others too. We, once again, a unique situation that we find ourselves in. About half of our pre-orders and waitlist customers are for other use indications, including children with autism, adolescents with severe anxiety, depression, suicide risk, adults with bipolar, schizophrenia, PTSD, seniors who are cognitively healthy but live alone and suffer from severe loneliness, write to us every day. I mean, literally every day, pleading to get a robot. Pleading to get a robot, so that we knew that we had the customer traction. We knew that there's demand beyond that traction. So that, from a business fundamental standpoint, really helped. And then I looked at ways in which we could bring in money, raising money from customers. We ended up doing regulation crowdfunding campaigns, which provided us with some bridge cash until we could get larger chunks from institutional investors. And so monetizing your customers, not just through product sales, but through
their belief,
turning their belief, even if they're only, putting in a couple $100, you get 1,000 of them. That's real money.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we had a couple institutional investors who really believed in this, really got caught up in this, and didn't want to see it fail. They didn't want to take additional risk. They put all kinds of conditions on their money coming in. But if those conditions were met, they were willing to put in real amount. And so we were able to recapitalize the business based upon that. But there was a lot of doubt that we were going to get across that chasm, that cash chasm. And we're just fortunate, particularly in today's economic climate, we were fortunate that we were able to do that.
Yeah, I heard a couple things here. I wanted to kind of break them down for the listener. But number one, that doubt piece that you just circled back up with is when things aren't going well, it's almost, especially as high achievers, I feel like it's just so easy to throw up the hands and be like, I should have never started anyway. You've been like fighting off all of the negative thoughts. You've been fighting off the family members or the people that said you're crazy. You've been fighting off self-doubt all this time. And then that moment that just tears you down, you're just really easy to succumb to all those things that you've been fighting off. And in those moments, what I heard you say that you did is that you leaned into the people that said that you were doing well, that you were changing their life, that things were really moving in the right direction. And so you had to kind of like reach into the cookie jar, as David Goggins says, and like remind yourself of why you're doing this thing, why you are who you are and why you're doing this thing. And so beyond that, though, I heard you say, obviously funding is the practical problem, but you pressed into maybe non-traditional areas. You just like looked at who loves us, who has an emotional connection to what we're doing, and how do we get what we need from them? We're obviously giving to them what they need. How do we make this thing even more mutually benefiting? For your case, you needed funding, but that principle could be applied to anything. As a founder, you might need different parts of the business. You might need to hire a COO. You might build a team. There's just so many other needs, and you would just look to the area of people that are your cheerleaders. Would you agree with this?
Oh, 100%. So, one of the other things too, it sort of comes with the territory of being a lone ranger. And once again, I credit that to immaturity. This need to create an image of being impervious, always successful. That turned out not to be a good tactic. Being transparent, being honest, being vulnerable, telling our investors, telling our customers that we need you to save the business, not just invest. We're not saying, hey, we're promising all you these great returns. Give us $1, we'll turn it into $1 million. It's this business should exist. This business should exist because there are a lot of people that we can help, but we won't be able to if you do not save this business. And so being very clear, being very transparent, being very vulnerable, motivated people to step up and probably do more than they were comfortable doing, quite frankly. And a lot of notes from customers apologizing that they couldn't do more. I mean, talk about gratitude. At the worst, in the darkest of days, realizing that you have a lot of people that really care about you, care about the business, care about the vision, and are willing to take risk personally in order to help support it. And so it was those kinds of things change you. They can't help but change you. The bad times change you, but also being saved changes you. And there's pretty much no lengths we won't go now to fulfill our customers' expectations.
Yeah. It's real courage. It's we talked about this before I hit the record button, that's my main objective here with these shows is to transfer courage. And it's like, if I got a dosage of courage every hour on the hour, maybe every 10 minutes, just hook me up straight to the IV of courage, I don't think I could get enough. And so I appreciate you sharing that, how you were able to get courage, even in sharing that story. It tells us that it's possible to go through it. You even gave some really clear practicals on where you got it from. So I appreciate that. I want to ask you about family. This whole thing has been about, your mom and that piece of your family, but you've been building a business outside of your family. And so I want to talk about balance. I think the word is erroneous, and I don't think it exists. Okay. So let me just set the stage. Okay. I think what exists is exactly what you just said about your team. We were talking about Henry Ford, and you said, look, our team didn't say, let's come up with a puppy idea and just see how many people like it. No, it was, this is the research. This is what we're going to make. This is what we're going to do. It was resolute. It was obsession. My thought process on life is that that's what also equates success in my family, in my health, in my lifestyle, in my faith, like all of those other areas. How for you, Tom? Are you obsessing in those areas at the same time as Jenny?
So I don't believe that high achieving people live balanced lives. I don't believe that you can get to that kind of achievement without being imbalanced, where that's your top priority. But you can't go so far as your family members paying a price for that. And so there has to be ongoing conversation with the family members. You have to figure out what's important to them. I'm a process guy, data guy. So what is important to my 5-year-old son? What is important to my 2 adult children from a previous marriage? What is important to my wife? What's important to my ex-wife and close friends and extended family? And making sure that I do those things for them, make sure that I structure my life in such a way that that's there. For example, I coach my son's soccer team. He tells everybody that his dad coaches his soccer team. The impact that you can make on somebody, even with small allocations of time, if it's in the right areas, it can really pay dividends. And so don't be afraid of those conversations. In fact, don't have them just once, have them on an ongoing basis. And you will fail for 100% for sure. You will fail, but you won't necessarily fail all the time. You do what you can, to achieve the success that you want without sacrificing the things outside the business that matter to you and matter to the people that care about you.
Wow. That was a really succinct answer. It's like I had asked you ahead of time. In all seriousness, though, it was super good. I hope that the listener paid attention to that, because what I heard was sit down, see the other humans in your life. Just like you paid attention in your business to who was connected to you emotionally, you've done that outside of the business. You sat down. Who are the relationships? Who are the humans that I need to pay attention to, that need either more time or more intention in the attention that I give to them, right? That's the soccer team. That's probably only a couple hours a week, but huge dividends, like you said, for your son. I just got back from a trip. We actually just did an in-person event for Gathering the Kings. And when I got home late last night, it was about 1:00 in the morning, and I snuck down to my almost 5-year-old son's room and woke him up a little bit. And he just like latched on like a monkey, and he didn't even remember it this morning. But I know in the moment, it was like, I know that's what he wanted me to do, is wake him up in the middle of the night when I got home. And so I think the intentionality of how you funded the business, but then I saw the same intentionality in your personal life. So you want to add anything there before we move on from that?
No, but I will tell you, I give you a little bit of insight. What you did for your son and what your son did for you changed your neurochemistry. It had a
Absolutely.
positive impact on your chemistry. Your son may not remember it, but you gave him a nice little neurochemical cocktail that made him comfortable. It reduces fear, it reduces anxiety. That's really what we're about. We as human beings are hardwired to form these emotional attachments where we can give them, whether it's to a child or a spouse or a friend or extended family or workmate.
Yeah.
It will make a difference for them, a physical, a measurable difference for them, even though it may be an insignificant act like simply going in and giving your son a hug and a kiss in the middle of the night.
Yeah. I want to, I'm not quite done with the interview. I got one more question for you, but I want to cap off what you just said with, this is exactly what Jenny is, right? It just, rather than the intentionality of human to human, it's a substitute, but man, a darn good one. And what you have are raving fans by the thousands and hundreds of thousands or millions at this point of going, there's a real need. And so I just wanted to just take a chance here to plug. I'm gonna give you a chance to tell us where to find it and how to buy it and stuff. But for the listener's sake, what we're talking about here, Tom and I, we're talking about the impact of emotional connection and moving people. That's really what we've just discussed in the last 5 minutes. And how you do that, even scientifically or neurologically, is exactly what Tom just gave to you. And so if you have a family member that can't have a live interaction, that's why Jenny, this robotic puppy, exists. It's why Tom has done all this work. So, Tom, I got one last question here for you. I want to wrap up with this. If you had the opportunity to just roll back the clock and you got the younger Tom sitting in front of you and you lean over, you tap on his shoulder and you whisper something in his ear, what do you say?
If I could have started the company again, so once again, there are all kinds of challenges that you take on to the company, technical challenges that are seem insurmountable, or you fail and you've got to navigate around them. By far the most important thing for the business was funding it. And I was naive. After building a previous business, bootstrapping a previous business with my partners, I took for granted that a really good idea, what I thought was a really good idea, would attract funding. Maybe it might be hard, but it wouldn't be impossible, pretty close to impossible. So what I would have done is I would have pursued more non-dilutive funding. So there are small business innovation research grants, SBIR grants available from the government, various, both state government and federal, but the ones that we focus on are federal grants. I would have been early and aggressive after going after those grants to fund the business. And they're a pain in the neck. They're hard to get. You can't count on getting them. And when you get them, you've got to comply with all kinds of things that are over and above just meeting fiduciary responsibility to investors.
Right.
And I looked at the difficulty there and I passed on that. And that was a mistake. I should have gone after those SBIR grants because I could have funded the company more efficiently early on. And those SBIR grants are signals to investors that, you can get grants, you can get non-dilutive funding. There are people that believe at the grant making level in your idea and want to see it exist. So that was a big mistake. We're going after them now, but not to fund the first innovation in the business, but to participate in the funding of the next innovation. I wish I'd done that sooner. And anybody who is looking at this, you can still work a different job and get those SBIR grants or STTR, which is the equivalent if you're in an academic setting and want to kind of take an academic project and turn that into a business. Should have done that. That was a big mistake.
Yeah. Love the insight there. Very practical. I wouldn't expect it any other way given from a data guy. Thank you for that. How can the listener find Jenny if they want to make a purchase for a family member of this incredible robotic puppy, or if they're an entrepreneur and they want to connect with you? How can they do either one?
So let me give you all of that information. First of all, we are still pre-market. We're not shipping our product yet. You can join our waitlist at www.tombot.com. So my first name, bot.com. My mother named the company. She asked me, she couldn't remember what she was having for breakfast in a given day, but she always remembered I was working on robots for her. And one day she asked me, says, well, what are you going to name the company? I said, I don't know, Mom. What do you think? And she said, well, how about Tom? I go, well, maybe not Tom exactly. And so it's tombot.com, and we have social media channels there where you can see lots of videos, you can see other major media interviews, you can see interviews that we do with experts in our space that talk about, from a practical standpoint, real health issues. They're not just promotional for Tombot. You can reach me. Probably the easiest way is through LinkedIn. You can, on our website, you can send emails to the contact. It's hello@tombot.com. I look at 100% of those. We have somebody who monitors those 7 days a week. You can connect with me through LinkedIn and direct message me there as well. But there, if you wish to, you can join our waitlist or our newsletter. There's no cost at this time for doing either. We are currently working on final alpha. Hope to be in beta testing just after the first of the year and ramping up production late next year. Of course, I'm raising more money. So if any of you here are also investors, I would love to talk to you about our vision and our, not just for our current product, but our product pipeline, and why, from a business model standpoint, this is a good idea, at least in my opinion. And once again, anybody has any questions and comments, just wants a few minutes of counseling for emotional support, I'm happy to talk to you. I couldn't have gotten here without lots of support from other people, and I'm happy to give support to others. And quite frankly, quite selfishly, I learn in every conversation I ever have. So I'm thrilled to have more conversations because it contributes to my learning. So please do reach out.
Spoken like a true king. Tom, appreciate the not only time, but the story, the vulnerability, as you said, your innovation, ingenuity, your mind. I just appreciate you sharing your mind here with us today. Thank you for sharing, Jenny. Jenny, I hope that you have a great rest of the day. And if we'll put all the information in the show notes for all those contacts for you, Tom, the listeners can connect with you. Blessings to you, your family, the Tombot team. Thank you for being here, brother.
Thank you so much, Chaz. It's been a pleasure. And thank you again for the privilege.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.